All right, so earlier in the week, I told myself Celtics Clippers Wednesday night, Celtics Lakers Thursday night, both in LA. I'm going to go to both games, and then I'm going to come home and I'm going to do a little monologue at the top of the Thursday podcast, no matter what happens. My worst case scenario is that the Celtics were going to be alarming in both games, and that we're going to have real questions now about what's going on with this team. Because it's beyond a funk and it's beyond an on-off button issue. There's something a little bit deeper happening. And I was fortunate enough to sit pretty close to the court both games. I was behind the Celtic bench for the Laker game, which was just embarrassing and really awful. And I think we're at the point now where we have to ask ourselves, is the Celtics team just different than it was last season? All right, well, what's different about it? Let's start with Jaylen Brown, who isn't shooting as well as he did last year. I'm not gonna do the thing where I just read you a bunch of stats. You can look up all these stats. He's not shooting as well. 3-pointers, 2-pointers. He's clumsier with the ball. He's closer to where he was 2 years ago than where he was last year. Where last year, it felt by the end of the season, Tatum was 1A and Jaylen Brown was 1B. Tatum is clearly better than Brown this season. There's the 1A, 1B thing is out the window. And I don't really understand what's happening here. Studying it in person for the last 2 days, he seems jacked. He looks like he's filming Rambo First Blood Part 2 or Predator with Stallone in the 80s. He's like really jacked to the point that I'm starting to wonder if it's made him a little more stiff. And there was some really weird Clipper moments on Wednesday night where they're playing against, the role players and the scrubs on the Clippers, because the Clippers rest everybody. They're furious with the league that the league rescheduled the Fire game and it was 6 games in 9 days. So they're like, we're throwing away the Celtic game. And as soon as they did that, I was like, watch this. I bet they hang around somehow with this Celtics. They were very well coached and they really exploited some of the Jaylen stuff that's been going on this year. What was fascinating about the Clipper game, Van Gundy, who's like the defensive coordinator on the Clippers, was just devising all of these different ways to mess with the Celtics. They were trapping Jason Tatum 45 feet from the basket as he was trying to do his point forward stuff. They were trying to dive at Jaylen's dribble, which a lot of smart teams do. They're also trying to trap him at the end of games and just basically make him make dumb plays, which he was, for whatever reason, really happy to do in that Clipper game. And they were exploiting the fact that this year, unlike last year, you can go by all the Celtic guys. You saw it in the Clipper game with guys like Derek Jones and Kevin Porter was doing it until the Celtics brought in Jaden Springer. The Lakers tonight, how many times did Reeves go by somebody? I mean, the Celtics, one of the best things about them last year was the White Holiday combo and the fact that those guys could lock down basically everybody in the other team. Tatum as a two-way player, Jaylen Brown, whose defense, especially in the playoffs, was great. And this year, they don't lock anybody down. Anybody in the league can go by them and get to the rim, which goes back to, is this an on-off button issue or is just something different than last year? This is not an old team. These guys are all in their 20s. These guys are all in their prime or about to hit their prime. And it's sloppy stuff that you could blame the fact that they had a 100-game season last year, that Tatum played in the playoffs, that not in the playoffs, in the Olympics, that White and Holiday were in the Olympics, that Horford's older, that they didn't have Porzingis for the first 2 months. There's all these things you can blame, and I'm perfectly fine with doing that. But it doesn't explain why Jaylen isn't as good as he was last year. Eye test over and over again, game after game, does not seem like the same guy as he was last year. Why isn't the defense as good as it was last year? Well, you can look at the advanced metrics and it seems fine. Even the last 19 games, they're 10-9. If you look at their net rating on NBA.com for the last 20 games of the season, not counting today at Lakers, they're second in defensive rating. So there's all these advanced things you can look at and be like, no, they're fine. But I'm telling you, if you're watching them every night, if you're going to the games, they don't really look fine. They don't lock teams down with defense the way they did. They're never up 20, 25 like they were. Last year, they felt like they were up 20 in 75 to 80% of the games. This year, that feels like they're down 15, down 10, down 12 in the first half of a lot of these games. And if you go back, you think they were 21-5, and now they're 31-14. So they're 10-9 in their last 19. I watched all of the games they lost, and I went to 2 of them. or went to one of them. The 10-9 thing starts with the Bulls. They lose because Levine is just the best guy on the floor. He's 36. He just beats them. He plays better than everybody in the Celtics. Fine. That's one game. They lose to the Magic, who were missing guys because they couldn't hit threes. They were 8 for 33 from threes. And if you watch that game, the Magic just played really hard. They played harder than the Celtics did. And you go, all right. Well, on-off switch, fine. Sixers Christmas, same thing. Sixers wanted the game more. You chalk that one up. Well, the Sixers, they had all their guys. It was national TV. They have a losing record. They wanted the game more. It was their Super Bowl. Chalk that one up. Just making excuses time after time with this. Pacers. They win the first game against the Pacers by 1,000,000 points. And 2 days later, the way this works with these, where you played the team 2 times in 3 games, you just know the Pacers are going to do better in the second game, which of course they do. But the Celtics shoot 54 threes and they lose. So you leave that game and you're like, too many threes. Didn't go to the basket enough. So again, excuses. OKC was the first sign of slight alarm because they played really well for 3 quarters. They were going toe to toe with a team that, they might be seeing in the finals, assuming they have a chance to get there. And then Drew stunk. SGA was the best guy in the game. And in the fourth quarter, in nut crunch time, which was really good for the Celtics down the stretch last season, especially in the playoffs, OKC just outplayed them and stole the game from them. Slight sounds of alarm for that one. They have a home no-show against the Kings, who just changed their coach. Drew and Derek White just looked ancient in that game. 3 for 12. Coming back from a little road trip where they look pretty good. Well, let that one slide. Again, excuses. They lose to Toronto, who's not good. And Toronto shoots 51%, and Jalen's awful. He's 4 for 16. Another bad sign. They choke against the Atlanta Hawks. And this was Drew. This was one of the worst. This is probably the worst game he played against Boston. They screwed up the game. The game was going to be over. They screwed it up. They blow it. Not the kind of thing that was happening last year, though. Fine. And then we go to this LA trip in these 2 games where Clippers game, just take care of the game. They're playing all their scrubs and their role players. Just knock them out. Knock them out. And the last year's team would have won the game by 40. This year's team, it's a struggle the whole time, and somehow it goes to overtime. They put miles on Tatum. They put miles on Brown. They put miles on White when they're playing the Lakers the next night, who are rested in a TNT game. So basically, they took so much effort to win that Clipper game that now they go into this Lakers game and they're a mess. So back to the Jaylen Brown thing. Last year, Brown and Tatum just had a really good thing going where there was games. If Tatum didn't totally have it, Brown would be able to lift it. And they just had a nice yin-yang thing that they just haven't had in the same way this year. And Jalen's offense has been really rough to watch. I could give you 1,000,000 stats. You can go look them up. But his 2-point shooting's way down. His 3-point shooting's way down. And he's added a couple things to his game that I just don't love. There's this flat-footed fall away he has now at the foul line. I can't stand that one. Does these weird drives to the basket where instead, sometimes he'll try to elevate and dunk on guys. Other times he's doing this flat-footed kind of keeping low to the ground, scoop into traffic thing that the Clippers were eating up last night. The alarming thing with Brown, back to the Van Gundy thing. So the Celtics are up 6 points, 4 points, whatever, in the last minute of regulation. And they're trapping the Celtics. They're doing all these things to try to get the Celtics screw up. And they basically target Jaylen Brown. And there's this one possession where Van Gundy's telling them, because we could see it. We're watching. Van Gundy's running the huddle. It was kind of amazing to watch. And he's telling the guys something. So they come out and the Celtics swing the ball and they swing it. And the Clippers are trying to get them to swing it to Brown. And they do. They trap Brown. He throws it away. Clippers score. Clippers come off and they're all fired up and they're pointing at Van Gundy. It was like, you told us that was going to happen. And I'm sitting there going, this is a bad sign if Van Gundy is just reading us like he's the defensive coordinator in a football game who knows our plays. He's steering us to the play that we don't want to happen. It just wasn't great. They were really, really outcoached in that Clipper game, which I did not love. But in general, he just, He'll hit some threes. The stats are fine. He can fool you unless you're actually watching game after game. He just hasn't been as good as he was last year. Derek White's another one. Derek White, who the first 6 weeks of the season, it was like, this guy's going to make the All-Star team. This guy is one of the best 30 assets in the league. And his three-point shooting has dropped by the month. 47% first month, 40%, 35%, 30 this month. The game today, he was like the 19th best player in the game. Obviously, he's not. But he's just not impactful. And then Holiday, who kind of comes and goes, and he's older, and he's clearly saving himself for the playoffs. First half of the game, non-existent. Second half of the game, they come out, they're pissed against the Lakers, and they're now playing defense. And Holiday is guarding everybody and has this little 5-minute stretch that reminded you, like, this is why this team's pretty special. When they can unleash Drew as like this defensive weapon, Tatum and Brown and Porzingis with his height, like this is it. This is the team we're used to seeing. And then, missed a couple shots. The Celtics were just so awful tonight. I don't know how many layups they missed, how many shots around the rim, but it felt like it was at least 20. They just couldn't buy a basket. They were just a complete mess. So the Brown thing's concerning, the White thing's concerning. Holiday is older. I'm going to chalk it up to that. The on-off switch thing, understandable. We've seen it happen a bunch of times with teams that won the title. But as we talked about before the season, the pods we've done, it could go one of two ways after you win the title. You either have the on-off switch or you have the chip on your shoulder because the bullseye is on you and everybody's coming after you. And you can take that personally and be like, you know what? We're going to kick everybody's asses again. That is not this Celtics team, at least so far. They got outcoached in a few games, especially recently. The OKC game, the Clipper game last night, which they ended up winning, but definitely outcoached in that one. Lakers game tonight. I don't know what the lineups, but they're playing Twin Towers the whole day. It's like you're doing the Lakers a favor when you're playing size, where you want to use your athleticism. Last year, one of the reasons they blew them out was they were building everything around their wings. Tonight, they're playing Cornette. They're doing Horford and Porzingis together. They didn't play Jaden Springer at all, even though his defense was so impactful yesterday. And I didn't really understand anything they were doing. I wanted them to put Jaden Springer on LeBron or Reeves, try to take those guys out and try to win the game with defense. They did the opposite, and the Lakers made everything they took. There is no real roster flexibility for trades. They're a second apron team. They have a bunch of big contracts and a bunch of small contracts and nothing really in between. Springer at $4 million, Pritchard at $7 million. They don't, and I don't even know what the move is. Like the move is to hope that the light bulb goes off with these guys because right now it's not going off. I mentioned Holiday with the age, 43% shooting from three last year, 35% from this year. They're just less special, and they have these funk games now that they just weren't having even in the first 6 weeks of the season. So, as I look at the state of the Celtics, conversations I have with my friends, with my dad, with everybody I know who likes the team, nobody is like, it's fine. It's okay. We're good. Nobody thinks that, but nobody is really in full panic either. It's more like, no, though, it should come back. I'm not sure the defense is going to come back in the way that that we really need it to come back unless Jalen can get back to where he was last year. And that's the guy I'm watching because I feel like Tatum actually made a slight step up, from last year as a two-way guy, as a point forward, as a reliable guy night after night after night. With that said, last night is a really good example of the difference between Jokic, Giannis, SGA, Luka when he's healthy, and then every other really good player in the league, including Tatum. Because last night was a night where it's like, you're playing all your role players and your scrubs. I'm going to have 43. I'm going to just ice this game myself. This is what SGA does over and over again. SGA had, 55 against Utah? Over and over again, he's just like dusting teams. And Tatum, as good as he is night after night after night, and the best thing about him is how consistent he is as a two-way guy. He's just not I'm just going to dust the other team and just get on my back everybody guy. So it's the collective shit that has to make this team special. And if Jalen's not quite where he was last year, if White's not quite where he was last year, if Holiday's a little older, if Horford's a little older, if you're moving Porzingis back in, the only guy who's gone up a level is Pritchard. And then on top of it, the league's better. The West is better. OKC's better. Cleveland's better. The Knicks are better. It's just everybody's deeper. It's a lot harder. You don't have 11 teams tanking yet. And you have nights like you lose to Toronto because, you fucked around. So when I think about like the trade deadline coming, and also it's not just the trade deadline, but the team is being sold. Like the bids were in today to get through the first round. There's at least 5 bidders. Everyone's expecting this to go to $6 billion. There's some instability within the organization, which is understandable because they're about to change hands from this great ownership and this great infrastructure they've had for the last almost 20 plus years to the unknown. So you have an organization that's a little more unstable than it was. You have a team that's not quite as stable as it was. The team I saw tonight against the Lakers, this is the thing that concerns me the most. The camaraderie / connection with the guys doesn't seem the same right now. And it might just be like, they're like an older married couple that, they've done this, they've been together, they don't need to do it. But there's a lot of plays where it's just 5 guys on the court, like when, they're shooting foul shots. So 5 guys on the court who just seem like they're not connected in any way. There's plays where like somebody makes a shot and gets fouled and it's going to be a 3-point play. And not all the guys come over and do the fist pump with them. It's little tiny stuff like that. It's the way the bench is reacting to certain things in the game. Not the same as last year. Last year, the bench standing up, going nuts. The personality of the team, you could just feel it. When you're in the building, when you're on TV, you don't feel it in the same way this year. In the Clipper game yesterday, Jaden Springer, because he, out of nowhere, and everybody likes him, and he just had an awesome game. He was great. He swung the game for them. And it really kind of ignited the bench. The bench was into it. They were psyched for him. He made a big 3 in the corner when Harden was like talking shit to him as he shot it, and he made it, and he ran off, and they were all going nuts. And then tonight in this Laker game, it just felt like they all just wanted to go home. So I'm both concerned and not concerned because I still don't know if there's 3 teams better than them. I don't think there's 3 teams more talented than them, and I think they should. There's no real reason that I can see that they can't make the finals again. But the way this is going, they're not going to have the 1 seed in the East, and they're not going to have a home court advantage in the finals if OKC gets in, and maybe even a couple other teams. Now you're looking at a situation where maybe even Denver can finish with a better record than them. So this is a question, and this is what makes trying to go back to back so great. And we've seen so many teams try to do it and not be able to do it. And there's always reasons for it. You always hit a point like this where you have to look in the mirror and decide, do we really want to defend our title or not? And what I'm seeing lately with the Celtics is a team that seems like a zombie version of itself, that doesn't seem to have that same chip on its shoulder, that doesn't seem to be treating a back-to-back title as a life or death experience for them. There's too many games now where the other team's playing harder than them, and too many games when they're not solving issues that are pretty obvious as you're watching. Like tonight, just take out Reeves, just play hard defense on LeBron, guard him full court. Just make sure you're not giving up open threes to people like Hachimura. That's another thing with the Celtics team. The open threes that they're giving up this year, it makes you want to rip your hair out. So again, it's not even February yet. A million things can change. One thing I'm looking for the rest of the way, and this is what I'll leave you with, is they have to have a win streak at some point. You have to put together 3-4 weeks of winning basketball night after night after night, where there seems like there's something special about your team. Even Dallas last year. And Dallas, was an unexpected party crasher that made the finals. But Dallas had this stretch after the All-Star break where for 25 games, they just were kicking ass and playing really well. The Celtics have not had a real stretch like that since the start of the season. And as this regular season goes on, if they're not going to do that, and this just becomes a night to night, I don't know what I'm getting from these guys situation. I don't think they're going to make the finals. So it's not urgent yet, but I'm flagging it. I didn't like what I saw the last 2 nights. One of those 2 games should have been good. Neither of them were. And honestly, they should have lost both games. So we'll see. This is a nice test for Joe Mazzulla. This is a nice test for the roster, whether they want to tinker around it, maybe get a little more athletic, especially on the wing. It feels like they're an athletic wing short. And then Jaylen Brown is the guy to watch going forward. What are his numbers? What is his impact? Can he be the 1B again? Because right now he's not. He's a 2. He's not a 1B. And if he's a 2, the ceiling of the Celtics team has to drop a little bit. I like what I've seen from Porzingis. I think the pedigree of this team is going to be there when it actually matters. They're going to have a home court when it actually matters. There's going to be a good crowd for them. But it's pretty alarming because the Lakers crushed them tonight, and I don't think the Lakers are good. So that was my takeaway was, this says way more about the Celtics than it does about the Lakers.